Andy, and welcome to this latest AppLearn podcast. My name is Andrew Barlow. I'm the Director of Product Strategy at AppLearn, and it's my pleasure to introduce today John Hampton, Director of HR Systems at UPS. John joins us. We're looking forward to this, to discussing a number of different topics in the digital transformation space. John himself has spent the last 25 years at UPS working in a number of different roles within the organisation, including working in US small package, UPS freight, global business services, and now more recently corporate HR. He is currently the Director of HR Systems at UPS and recently successfully managed the global implementation of Cornerstone On Demand in 2017. So John, welcome to the AppLearn podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Andy. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Good afternoon to us in the UK, and good morning to you, John. So let's get started. First of all, just a little bit of an overview around why we asked John to participate in this podcast. Many organizations around the world are investing in digital technologies to underpin various different internal and external facing processes within their organizations. We're seeing organizations, investing daily, spending multi-millions of pounds to do that. And given John's experience implementing Cornerstone On Demand to support the digitization of HR processes at UPS, we wanted to have an opportunity to share those experiences with other like-minded practitioners around the world that are either embarking on those types of initiatives themselves internally or have already implemented those types of technologies. So I guess really, John, to start, we're all interested in a little bit of an overview. At UPS, what did you manage? What was the initiative with Cornerstone On Demand, and how did you digitize HR processes at UPS?
Sure, Andy. So just to give some background, really what we embarked in was a journey. Started off prior to doing any technology selection, was to redesign the career and performance processes at UPS, which had really been static for over 20 years, supported by internally developed platforms that were some were centralized and some were disparate experiences for employees. And we knew that those processes served us very well for being a company that's been in existence for as long as we have. But we knew that it wasn't going to be the processes that would sustain us and our growth in the future. So we first took a step back and said, really, what do we want career and performance processes to look like, and what is the business outcomes we want from those? And then once we got through that, then we went out and did the RFP and found technology to find something that could fit our new processes into. When we took a look at the scope of what we were trying to go down to, really what it included was performance and career management, as well as compensation, so annual merit administration globally, and as well as the learning management system, or at least our main global LMS for all leadership training and compliance training. And while UPS has over 440,000 employees, the scope of our implementation was about 165,000 users in all 80 countries that UPS has captive employees in globally. And when we looked at that, it's pretty much everybody in the world except our U.S. drivers and package handlers. So it's all our management globally, all our administrative, technical employees around the world. And now they have the opportunity to go to one integrated platform. And we have a pretty unique use case because we also have a franchisee model, which some of you might be familiar with the UPS stores. And so that we had to have an opportunity to provide the LMS to the franchisees' employees, and so they could come in and take their store training in the Cornerstone environment. And we also had some third-party aircraft maintenance mechanics that travel around the world that are our employees that also needed access to the LMS. So again, 80 countries, 165,000 users. We did translate the platform into 22 languages. We bought the language pack, so it is the most translated employee-facing software that our company has. And we're really looking for this one technology that could facilitate all these processes from the employee perspective.
John, my eyes are watering just listening to the numbers that you're discussing there. I'm sure that a lot of other practitioners on the phone are also interested too, given the scale of UPS and the scale of what you've embarked on there. What I found incredibly interesting about the UPS story, and having spoken to you, is that when you originally started to scope this and plan this from a timeline perspective, all the way back, you're rolling back to that time when you started the planning exercise. I'm right in thinking that you didn't push any milestones back, did you? You didn't change any milestones whatsoever?
Yeah, I think that one of the things we learned from Cornerstone, as well as we used an implementation consultant partner to help us through our journey, is that because we'd spent due diligence a couple years prior to going down the path of finding the technology and starting the implementation, we came in with a lot of the policies and processes already defined. So we were able to after we picked the vendor, start the integration and start the configuration in January of 2016, and we went live with the whole platform for all users globally at the same time in the first quarter of 2017. So pretty much configured the platform within 10 months, trained the workforce within 7, kind of overlapped, and then went live with each of the processes between January and March of last year.
That's definitely putting the big in Big Bang. I can certainly say that. It's brave almost to attempt such a significant transformation. But I guess from your perspective, you front-loaded a lot of the activities, didn't you? You'd worked very hard before you actually started to configure the system around process design, around the considerations, that stakeholders might need to undertake when they're adopting the tool. But before we get into that, quick question: what was the rationale for the change at UPS? Why did you decide to embark on this journey in the first place?
Sure. It stemmed mostly around our ability to manage the talent pipeline, and that was identified as an enterprise top priority by our management committee. We knew in places we had inconsistent global policies. We also know that we had many labor-intensive manual processes, specifically outside the U.S., to where, of course, our origins and our core, and while we have over 300,000 employees in the U.S., some of the experiences deteriorated as you went across the other 79 countries outside the U.S. Our existing architecture, I might have mentioned this to you before, that we do a great job building world-class package delivery systems. We might not do the best job of building in-house talent management, performance management, and compensation systems, and that's exactly what we had done 20 years ago, and then managed those internally, and knew that in the future we were going to need to transition and go to a SaaS solution that we could be getting technology that was getting updated with leading practices.
Yeah, so it gives you an opportunity to take advantage of what basically SaaS can offer, basically solutions that are a little bit more flexible. That's really interesting. I think one of the other things that I found really interesting about the UPS story is how you approached the project initially. For me, I speak to a lot of practitioners, a lot of organizations around the world that are implementing new digital technologies, digitizing various different processes. And very often they let the functionality of the technology dictate what their process design begins to look like. But you didn't do that, did you? You started with the process design first and spent a lot of time on that. Could you explain that in a little bit more detail?
Sure. So really we wanted to know what were the business outcomes that we wanted to get with these processes, either from a performance management perspective, which we'd already started down that journey, and of course a lot of other clients or customers on the call probably have. If when you differentiate performance, then you can differentiate the rewards that you give your folks. We also wanted to take a similar approach with career and say, okay, we can differentiate career opportunities and career development opportunities based off the interest of our employees. While there are needs of the organization, we wanted to make sure that, because those processes, like I mentioned, stayed static for so long, we used to have a one-shop, it fits everybody, career development plan. Everyone does a career development plan, but does everyone need the same development? Is there people that don't want to advance in the organization but just want to stay current in their current roles. And is that a bad thing culturally? No, it's really not. And we had to make sure people felt comfortable with that, and that, hey, if you want to stay current in your current job, we're going to give you this type of development plan. But if you're going to want to advance and take on more responsibility within UPS, we're going to need to do some other things to prepare for you, probably some things to accelerate that development because of some of the cliffs that we're going to have, just like other employers, with people that are going to be exiting the workforce in different geographies and in different job groups and functions, and we want to prepare for that. So by identifying the talent of who wants to advance, then we can know where they're at and then be able to associate the correct development plan. So that was a big piece for us from a process redesign. And then we also knew that feedback is our process hadn't changed, is our employees and managers didn't enjoy or get the most out of that experience. And there was, from a performance perspective, there were many employees that felt that their year-end performance evaluation was an inaccurate reflection of their job performance. So how can we better tie their goals to their performance ratings and get managers through some training on how to do unbiased performance reviews and make that part of our training and our rollout. Like I mentioned, to be able to do this effectively and have a global talent pool, you need to have global talent policies, and specifically around relocation and education. So as people are getting put in these talent pools, that the bar to get into these pools is set the same for everybody. So we spent a lot of time looking and building education equivalency tables across the countries to make sure that degree types that are called one thing in one area of the world are equal to something else somewhere else. And so then when we are considering people the best as we can to try to make sure that we're considering people based off the same capabilities.
Absolutely. And I think what practitioners can learn from this is really putting your people first. It's thinking about, what opportunities do we want to give them? Where are the process gaps at the moment? Let's fix those first, and then let's buy, best in class, world class technology to underpin that. And as I mentioned before, some organizations don't do that. They say, okay, we're going to buy this tool. What processes could we configure inside it? And they often find that the processes that they have implemented and configured inside the technology are not fit for purpose, because they've looked at what the capabilities of the technology are rather than what their people actually need. So I think that's an amazing achievement, and it's come to fruition through the successes that you've had recently. Just moving on, you invested in Cornerstone on demand. I know Cornerstone very, very well. One of the best technologies in the HR landscape. Where do you see the biggest benefits from your investment in Cornerstone coming?
Yeah, there's a few. As I mentioned, it being a SaaS solution, and that's going to be providing those quarterly updates, and the ability for our processes now to be dynamic in the future, supported by dynamic technology, and that we can grow into functionality that's available based off, best-in-class practices, based off all the client base that recommends these enhancements to the product that gets included in the roadmap. So I'd say that was first. And then it only goes to say the integrated platform experience from the end users of going to one place to do my goals, my development plans, the assessments of my people, and then once the performance reviews are done, going into the same system to award the annual merit increases and doing all my online learning. Then the languages I mentioned before, we do a lot of stuff for our customers, and making sure that we make sure that customer experience is well received for all the shipping needs in several different languages around the world. But this was, again, doing the right thing for our employees and making sure they had the same experience.
That's interesting. I see that as a common trend across a lot of organizations at the moment. Specifically, I was speaking to an organization in the financial services space who said they're looking to create a similar consumer-like experience for their internal colleagues as they do with their external products. And that's not always been the case, has it? It's usually, the internal applications don't look as nice and attractive. But I've seen the way that you've configured Cornerstone, and it looks pretty impressive from a consumer perspective.
Yeah, and it's been pretty well received from that standpoint from our employees, and specifically as we roll out parts of the processes to lower level job groups like administrative and hourly employees around the world that are going to need the language capabilities more so than maybe our management folks. And that's something that really attracted us, because it's kind of hard to go back and put translations on homegrown systems that weren't designed for that, because you'd end up creating separate instances of the same technology translated versus having a configurable platform that allows you to put in the translations for each field.
Absolutely, and the cost of maintaining those systems over time, in line with browser updates and things like that, another benefit that SaaS technologies bring. Focusing in on users, you've already explained that you almost put your people at the heart of this strategy, which is great. Help us understand a little bit more about the stakeholders. How did you assess the different stakeholders that you had that were going to sort of be impacted by this change? How did you manage various different users?
Sure. So we really, first of all, tried to solve for what I'd say 4 different personas. Our old technology typically delivered the same experience no matter who you were or where you were in the world when you logged in. So if you were an hourly employee up to a person in our C-suite, you were logging in the same system and pretty much being presented with the same experience, depending upon which of the processes you would be going to do in that particular piece of technology. When we looked at the opportunity with Cornerstone and the robust ability to configure and set security roles and permissions, we really wanted to focus now on the different experiences that we could provide to the employee versus the manager persona, which is also an employee doing these processes, but now he or she has to manage those processes for their folks. What does a leader need? A person at a higher level that wants to see the health of the career and performance processes across their area of the organization, and then not leaving out the 4th persona, which is our HR business professional. And that's the HR business professional that's supporting a broad geography area of UPS, and how can they make sure as they're going out and being the face of these processes and the facilitation of career and performance management and compensation, that they understand how they can use the tool, not only to make sure that they're driving success within their area. We also knew that we had several different manager stakeholders throughout the implementation, and now even as our go live, that we have to manage through regular stakeholder and governance processes. Our business process owners that actually own the process and policy around performance and career and compensation and learning. Our unique business units and geographies around the world, their leadership. 2 of our executive stakeholders, which is actually our senior vice president of HR and our CIO, as well as our management committee, who have a vested interest, because when you talk about processes that are near and dear to almost every employee in the organization, it's about a person's development and how they're rated for performance and how they're compensated, and all those things mean something to somebody, and everyone's got an opinion, and we wanted to make sure that we were listening as we were going through this design change.
I think it's safe to say that you were listening, that a really good assessment of the various different stakeholders. And again, that's something that is not always common in other organizations, and a good understanding of the stakeholders that are going to be impacted by this change, and how to specifically manage them from an adoption perspective, adopting new processes, new behaviors, new technology is critical to success. But you also had change agents as well, didn't you, John? Interested in that? How did you approach that?
Sure. So one of the things that we found out early on in this process is that we identified this as being an enterprise initiative, not an HR initiative. So therefore, it means something different if it's rolled out from our leadership, and it's something that is needed by everyone and supported by leadership outside just the HR function. So with that, and getting that buy-in from our management committee, each one of the business units provided us with a change agent. So we ended up with 39 of them assigned to our project for 1 year. And this group of individuals were some developing leadership within their areas of responsibility that were tasked with the responsibility of connecting with my team, staying connected with the implementation, the rollout, what we were doing with the training and the policies, as well as the technology, and so that they could be that voice of the change back in their area and supporting HR and really leading that in their business planning unit teams, and then giving us that most needed feedback throughout project implementation, and so that we could make corrections or reinforce the communications and the strategy that we were on.
I think it's fair to say, John, that the scale of this project is huge, and I think that there are some unique challenges that come with implementing such a large change to such a large number of employees, 165,000. But also there are commonalities in the types of challenges that organisations face. Even if they have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 users. From your perspective, what were some of the main considerations that you had from a change and a training perspective, and what were your considerations for support during the planning phase?
Sure. So really, when we looked at this, because the process has been so static, we went into this not so much concerned about the technology implications, but more concerned about the process change implications, because that was the biggest part of the change management that we were going to undertake, to make sure that people understood, regardless of technology, what we expected from you from a performance management and career management as a manager for your people going forward, and as an individual employee, what your role was to participate in those new processes. So therefore, we went very heavy on the process side of the training, and we developed an in-house 2-day curriculum workshop in person that we facilitated in 24 countries to 13,000 managers. So it was a 2-day workshop that all 13,000 of our mid-managers and above in the entire organization had to attend over a 7-month period to learn all about the process changes that were getting ready to take place in 2017. So we started that training in 2016, finished it up in the first half of the year of 2017, and then that was supported by about 9 to 10 hours of online training modules that we loaded into Cornerstone on performance and career and succession management that all our part-time management and above globally had to take. So about 83,000 management employees around the world took the online training, and then it was reinforced by their mid-managers who attended the 2-day workshop. And then, of course, having those 39 change agents behind the scenes that were out there also to help support us with this, as well as our enterprise communication strategy.
Absolutely. So just to recap then, 13,000 managers went into a 2-day workshop. Those the numbers, John?
Yes.
That's a lot of tea and coffee.
No, it sure was, and we were really happy because we ended up with almost 98% of those 13,000 made it into the training in those 7 months.
Absolutely. So moving on, we've talked quite heavily on the planning phase. We've talked quite heavily on the actual journey on which you embarked. Let's roll forward now to go live. People are going to start logging into the application. What were some of the learnings that you had regarding sort of support and user training pre-go live? What did you notice as people started to engage with Cornerstone and the processes that you just implemented?
Right, and like I mentioned, it's probably no surprise that since we spent the majority of the time focusing on the process, when folks came into the classroom trainings or the online trainings, we didn't have platform training included in those curriculums. We found that that while the technology was intuitive for users in many areas of the platform, it wasn't in all, and in certain areas, specifically in performance management. So we probably should have, in retrospect, gone back and done more on platform training up front. But again, we wanted to make sure the processes were followed, regardless of the technology. So we made that choice. And really, the training was almost 2/3 of our budget overall for this program versus, the technology being about 1/3 of it. So we did put all that emphasis on the training. It's just probably the main lessons learned is that because we did a big bang and rolled out the platform to all users all at once, that again, it was a little overwhelming to our users in year one, and we need to circle back to help them with the technology piece. In terms of the post-life considerations, it was the fact that our implementation consultant as well as Cornerstone advised us, hey, why don't you just do one at a time? And we said, we waited 20 years. We're ready to do this. We're going to do it all at one time versus the staged implementation that maybe would have helped out a little bit with that adoption early on, but we wanted to see the business results quicker. And we figured that with the big bang and knowing that, hey, if we get the majority of people into this in the year one, they're using the processes, and we're seeing that in year one, that in year two, we can go back and clean up some of the behavior pieces where process wasn't adhered to. We'll be ahead in 3 years based off of what we did versus if we had done it in a staggered approach.
Yeah, and again, another thing for practitioners that have not been on this journey yet and that are thinking about going on this journey is that post go live, you're obviously looking at certain metrics and certain measures around performance, utilization of the technology, execution of the key business processes. So you are doing an assessment post go live, and I guess gaining some feedback as to how people are engaging with Cornerstone and the business processes. What sort of key areas are you assessing there? How many people engage with the process? How are you sort of measuring adoption there?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing, and to help with the adoption of the actual platform itself, is we've done a lot of video snippets, things to put out in front of our users, because I feel that 80% of our workforce decides to log into systems and click and hope for the best, and don't like to read a lot of the support documentation and training that we provide. That's why we've engaged with AppLearn and are turning on the Adopt platform here in our Cornerstone environment here within the next 30 days. We started this journey back in December to get this ready, and so that we can give the inline help to our employees where they need it, and then they can get the split screen and watch videos and see on-demand documents for when they need when they're stuck somewhere within the platform versus going back to a repository for information and having to read. And so we think the analytics from the Adopt tool is going to help us with that, as well as just the task data from Cornerstone itself. Tells us a lot about process adoption, because we've had over 171,000 users who've logged into the system since we've gone live in January of 2016. We know that just from a process adoption, that some of that task data tells us where we have the gaps, performance specifically. We know the way we designed goals and the way we wanted people to use targets in the platform were to set their starting values at 0, and we can go now and see that 17,000 users last year created 54,000 goals incorrectly, and they didn't follow the UPS process, that they went to the workshop or took one of the online training modules that should have trained them. So now we can send marketing emails out and not have to send this blanket marketing approach and hope we reach the intended audience that needs to make the correction. We can go after the 17,000 users who didn't follow the process and quickly correct them. We know UPS University and the learning management system was the most widely adopted, and we're really happy because we had over 1 million online course completions in the first year. We have about 19,000 pieces of content loaded into Cornerstone in the first year so far for mostly leadership and compliance. And then we've got almost 8,000 employees using the platform in a language other than English.
I mean, that's incredible. It's an incredible learn. And the fact that not only have you successfully implemented Cornerstone in the way that you wanted to, but now you're actually basically optimizing Cornerstone. You're actually identifying ways that you can improve the experience over time by providing inline help, and also optimizing, I guess, the value, because you said that some stats there. Just on the stats, by the way, you mentioned the stat of 171,000 employees had logged into the system, and 165,000 employees it was implemented to initially. Again, just for practitioners on the call, there's another learn there, because John, I'm right in understanding that the reason why it's 171 is because you've hired a lot more people in the meantime since Cornerstone's been live, just to clear that up?
No, that's accurate. Because of turnover and expansion in certain areas, we've got more users in the platform. Exactly. So we're happy with the amount of users that have been in the platform in the first year.
Yeah, and it is something that is often overlooked when organizations sort of embark on these transformation journeys, is they don't consider the fact that they're going to hire 5, 10, 15% of their organization each year on year, and they have an opportunity or a need really to also onboard and support those future users. I guess they could potentially become an additional stakeholder. How do we support future users of the platform as well, so that training and support strategies are sustainable in that respect. In terms of the approach from a post-go live perspective, it's clear that you focused on identifying support opportunities and support gaps for future users. And you also have a use case in 2019, don't you? That can you expand a little bit about that, about the seasonal drivers?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things as we look at other opportunities to take advantage of this investment is that many of you probably know our peak season around the holidays is to deliver a significant amount more packages around the world to our customers. So we have to flex our workforce up from that 440,000, and it goes well almost up to 600 to 650,000 people during the fourth quarter of each year. So therefore, how do we use this new tool to help to train and onboard the 100,000 plus seasonal driver helpers, the folks that go out en route with our drivers, as well as the personal vehicle drivers in some rural areas around the world that drive their own vehicles to deliver our packages during that time frame. So we've got a use case that we tested with about 5,000 folks using Cornerstone in the mobile app this past December, and we're going to roll it out globally this holiday season. But it's really these folks never actually have to report to a UPS facility for any other duration of employment because we hire them in a specific zip code to go on a route with the driver. They will be applied through the applicant tracking system, and then they will actually get assigned to a driver in an area and get a welcome, and you've been hired to UPS after their interview, and they will be assigned to an area to go to report to, and the driver will pick them up on the delivery route their first day, give them their uniform or vest. They will deliver and then drop them off back near their home at the end of each day. They're going to take their orientation and their training in the Cornerstone LMS on their personal technology device prior to that day and get their certification and have their orientation complete. And that way they don't have to come in to the UPS facility, which in some areas could be, anywhere between 50 and 70 kilometers away. So they could actually do all that online and then still just report out to meet their driver.
That's amazing. So just to recap, I mean, we touched briefly there on managing ongoing support. Again, this is something that a lot of the audience will be interested in. Post go live, looking at the sort of the operational adoption and continuous improvement, if you like, of processes. You mentioned a couple of the areas that you were tracking from an analytics perspective, but how are you looking to sort of measure adoption and improve engagement, with key business processes over time now, moving into the future? Sure,
and I think it's going to be, like I mentioned, using the Adopt by AppLearn platform to look at the analytics and where people are seeking help as they're going through the processes, and we can see where that's being used the most, where we need to enhance that, or if we see abandonment rate in those areas or low process adoption, we can definitely enhance that experience for them. And again, like I mentioned, is taking a look at all the process data, because really we don't know the organizational impact yet to these process changes to UPS. We're 1 year into the first full cycle, just completing the first full cycle of doing all these performance and career processes in Cornerstone. So it's probably going to be another year until we can get some really good analytics and trends to start to say, hey, what are starting to see the surface of some of the organizational impacts of this journey that we started. Okay, so we're really looking at process and task completion data as well as what the support needs are in the business. That's something that most people will be interested in looking at for their own specific projects, either technologies that they've already implemented or technologies that they're going to be implementing in the future. So, I think from my perspective, there's a good learn there around how to improve the operational adoption into the future and get even more value from your investment in technologies. So from my perspective, some final comments and takeaways from this session. I think, if I can just summarize, before I hand over to you, John, your implementation is somewhat unique. The transformation the journey that you've been on is somewhat unique, and there are some, as I said before, some eye-watering numbers in there, but there are also some common challenges that we see a lot of our customers. So I would say to the practitioners that are on this live podcast or that listen to it afterwards that some of the challenges that John has overcome you will face the same or similar tasks, and that's because
there are some common themes with SaaS technology deployment. The fact that there are going to be regular, process and system updates post go live. The fact that you need to manage, stakeholders and help them adopt this new digital way of working. So there's a lot that can be taken from that. But I think it's fair to say, John, that yourself and what your colleagues have done at UPS with your implementation of Cornerstone and the digitization of HR is an unbelievable story, and I'd just like to say thank you very much for sharing that with us. From your perspective, what are the final takeaways? What do you really think that people can learn from your experiences implementing digital technologies at UPS?
Sure. I guess the first one is I just recommend to any of you, regardless of the size of the project, especially something that's impacting your entire enterprise or organization, is I recommend that you double the amount of time in the planning stage that you anticipate, because it's time well spent, and then you're not trying to figure out and go get decisions made while you're sitting there trying to configure new technology to deliver and meet timelines for implementation. Of course, some technology implementations, you have more time based off the cyclical nature of maybe some of the processes that technology supports, and sometimes that technology can just be deployed anytime throughout the year, depending upon what the intended audience is. So therefore, I just recommend double the amount of time, and I think because we did that and had a lot of that policy and process up front decided upon, and we also spend a lot of time with the integrated project plan schedule between our implementation consultant with Cornerstone and the UPS team and our IT teams combined, that we actually sat down in over a 3-week period here in Atlanta, Georgia, and made the integrated project plan and between all the groups, the 13 project managers, and it was almost 3,000 lines. And with that, the milestones that we set in February 2016 were the milestones that we went live with in 2017. So we did not miss any of our dates from the major milestone perspectives, and we really attribute that because of the extra time we spent on the planning. The other pieces that I can say, Andy, is just to make sure, if depending upon what you want to do, is ensure you have enough resources to support your implementation plan. And specifically because UPS took the advice of our partners to said, hey, do this one at a time, and we said, no, we're going to do it all at one time. We went resource heavy. And we put additional resources on assignment on the UPS side during that duration to make sure that we could meet those milestones. So I had a team of 41 people globally assigned to me for 18 months, and this is all their job is to help make sure that we were able to successfully go through all the governance policy, data privacy agreements, work council agreements, union agreements around the world in these 80 countries to make sure that that was all staged and ready to go, and so that when the technology was ready to turn on, that we didn't have any obstacles, and we kept the whole globe on the same implementation timeline. And then finally, I can say just is making sure that balancing the training for the process and the platform technology. As you can hear from our lessons learned, we decided that we needed to make that focus and that tremendous investment on the process side, hoping the technology would be a little bit more intuitive than it ended up being for all users. I'm not saying it's not, it just wasn't in all geographies and for all job groups. So therefore, we're going back and playing catch up a little bit in those areas. Thanks, Andy.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for the takeaways. Okay, so we're just going to move into the Q&A session. We've got a number of different questions here, John. So I'm just going to throw them straight at you. So catch them if you can. Question number 1: how did you secure the budget for this transformation within UPS?
Sure. Because it was an enterprise initiative, and it was something like I mentioned when you talked about why did we go do this and what was the business case, knowing that our management committee and our highest level leadership identified this is an organizational need, I guess helped make that a little bit easier of a business case because there isn't a tremendous return on investment. As you know, when you're investing in some of these type of technologies and looking at the positive ROI, on top of that, adding a training budget to boot. But if everyone agrees that this is something they need strategically to run the organization and align our people and talent strategies, it was something that we had to go back through different iterations, and it was mostly around the process changes. And then once everyone agreed that the process changes needed to occur, then it became evident that it needed to be facilitated through new technology.
And another question here. Were there any overarching key success measures for the project?
In terms of separating implementation, key milestones and successes versus, again, like I mentioned before, the processes themselves and the impacts they have. There's measures of success that we hope to see over the next couple of years. Of course, from an implementation timeline, it was the fact, hey, deploy this thing on time, within schedule and resources and cost, and we were able to do all that. So that was one of our major wins, is that during 18 months we didn't miss any of our time frames, and we didn't have to go back and ask for more money, and we didn't have to go ask for more people to help with the deployment. So that was the getting across the finish line measures of success. And then now looking in year one, we more or less, it was process adherence, not so much process outcome. It was getting in there and finding out, okay, how are the users interacting with these processes and the new technology? Where are they doing things right? Where are they doing these wrongs? Where can we make corrections? We spent so much time doing governance on policy and process redesign. We didn't have to worry about the fact that this redesign of 20 years worth of processes, that we're going to be changing a lot of things from year one to year two. So even as we just embarked into the year two startup of our second year of processes, we're not changing anything in the platform. So everything's going to ride with the same configuration that we had last year. Now we'll start tracking some of those measures of success that says, okay, how are we now correlating the people that we've tagged for different levels of position fit based off of their assessments? How are we promoting those people? Are we promoting the people that we said were the folks that should get promoted, or are we back into our own old processes where we had disparate processes and we didn't have visibility of the talent, so you really couldn't target in to say, were you promoting the right people at all times in every position? So some of those measures of success will start to be able to track to this year and year two, but definitely have across each one of the process areas, performance, career, compensation, learning, measure success in the steady state that we're hoping to achieve.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, John. I just want to say, guys, we've received quite a lot of questions. We're not going to be able to answer them all before we close out. But hopefully we'll be able to follow up potentially with some questions for John. But the last question that we're gonna allow for the session today, John, you mentioned that the part of the strategy was having one integrated platform in one place that all employees could access. The question that we received is, to what extent did you consider integrating the Ats capability as well? From what you said, it was assuming that was separate. Is that the case?
Yeah, we did not. We had to keep that. We could have made this scope bigger, and then we would have never deployed. But the ATS, we did not use on the Cornerstone platform because we have 3 instances of PeopleSoft that we use around the world as our core HCM. And believe it or not, because of all that hiring that I said that we do in the U.S., UPS built its own ATS back in 2002. Probably prior to ATS is becoming very popular, just because of the sheer volume and the hiring that we did. We built our own, and because that's so customized to our hiring process in the U.S., we use Taleo internationally right now. But it is something in the future as we look at the functionalities of ATSs, including Cornerstone. That's not to say that we might transition in the future. It's just at this time right now that was not in scope for us.
Okay. So, John, it's that time. I just want to say a massive thank you to you for joining the live podcast today. Thank you for sharing your experiences. We wish you all the best with your future endeavors at UPS, also with the Cornerstone project. And we look forward to seeing more and hearing more from you in the future.
Thanks, Andy.
And thank you to everybody who joined the live podcast today. We really do appreciate it. We hope that you found a lot of value in the discussion, and obviously we'll follow up and share with you the recording post the webinar. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. As always, you can find all of the podcasts that we create here at AppLearn across our various different social channels, and also on applearn.com. Please feel free to share and distribute the podcast, and any feedback would be more than welcome. If you would like to participate in a future AppLearn podcast, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.